All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a massive story coming out of India, a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of the entire country's tax system. And look, this isn't just some small adjustment. It's a huge plan that's going to affect millions and millions of people and one of the fastest-growing economies on the planet. And it all kicks off with this promise, framed by the Prime Minister himself as a double Diwali gift. Now, that framing, it's absolutely key. It tells us the government wants this to be seen as more than just a policy change. No, this is being positioned as a national celebration, a gift of prosperity, timed perfectly for the country's biggest festival. So this wasn't just some casual announcement. This promise was made during the Prime Minister's Independence Day address right from the historic Red Fort. That alone tells you how important this is on the national agenda. This is a top-level priority, and the deadline they've set to deliver this gift is Diwali 2025.
So what exactly is this GST 2.0? Well, in a nutshell, it's the biggest shakeup to India's goods and services tax since the whole thing was first introduced way back in 2017. The core idea really is to provide some major relief for both regular consumers and businesses by making the whole system a lot simpler.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. The plan really boils down to two main goals. First up is simplification. Making the tax system way easier for everyone to deal with. And second, and this is the big one for most people, we're talking about some pretty significant tax cuts.
So one of the biggest things this plan tackles is just how complicated everything is right now. You've got four main tax slabs: 5%, 12%, 18%, and a whopping 28%. The new proposal, it would collapse all of that into just two main slabs, probably landing at 5% and 18%. For businesses, especially the smaller ones, this is a game changer. It could slash their paperwork and headaches.
But look, the part of this reform that you and I are really going to feel in our day-to-day lives is the tax cut on everyday items. This is where the plan really hits home for millions of households all across the country. And we're not talking about a small change here. The scale is massive. A huge number of essential goods, things you buy all the time, are currently taxed at 12%. The proposal is to drop them all the way down to just 5%. I mean, think about that. That's cutting the tax rate on these things by more than half. And the scope here is just wow. The proposal suggests that something like 99% of all items currently in that 12% bracket will shift down to 5%. We're talking about things like packaged food and clothing. And it's not just at the lower end. About 90% of items in that highest 28% slab are also expected to move down to 18%. The message is pretty clear. This is a massive, broad-based tax cut.
But hold on, it's not all tax cuts across the board. The plan also brings in a new, much higher tax rate for one specific item: cigarettes. They'd be looking at a new 40% tax. So that shows the reform is also targeting certain goods with what are sometimes called sin taxes.
All right, so we've covered the what, the slab changes, the rate cuts. But now let's get to the real question, right? The so what? Why does this actually matter, and who is it really supposed to help?
Well, the idea here is to create this sort of positive ripple effect that benefits three key groups. It all starts with individual households, then it moves up to businesses, and the hope is that ultimately it gives a big boost to the entire national economy. And here's how that's supposed to work. For regular households, it's pretty straightforward. Lower taxes on goods should mean lower prices, which leaves more money in your pocket. At the same time, for businesses, especially those MSMEs, the small and medium enterprises that are really the backbone of the economy, a simpler system means less red tape and lower costs. The two are designed to feed into each other.
So what's the big picture goal here? The end game? It's to spark a nationwide consumption boom. By putting more money into people's hands right before the Diwali festival, a time when spending is already at its peak, the government is hoping to ignite a huge wave of spending that lifts the whole economy.
Of course, this all sounds pretty ambitious, but it's important to remember this is still a plan. It's not a done deal just yet. Making it a reality means following a clear roadmap with some really important steps between now and that Diwali 2025 target. So here's the game plan. The whole thing kicked off with the Prime Minister's recent announcement. Now the baton gets passed to a special group of ministers. It's their job to hammer out all the final details. Their work is going to be absolutely crucial in shaping what this reform actually looks like, all with the really ambitious goal of rolling it out by Diwali 2025. And that really brings us back to the big question we started with. The promise is huge.
the potential impact is enormous. But will this grand tax overhaul truly be the double Diwali gift that ignites India's economy? That's the billion-dollar question, and you can bet we'll all be watching very closely over the coming months to see how this story unfolds.